When you think of someone who's tough, what comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's that loud, maybe abrasive leader, the colleague who just has to dominate every single meeting. It's a performance of strength we see all the time, right? But what if I told you that entire performance is just a mask for something, well, something incredibly fragile?
Right, so let's get right into it, because this question is really the whole point. What is real strength? The genuine kind, especially when the pressure is really on. Well, it turns out the science has an answer, and it's probably not what you're expecting. And here's the big idea, the main takeaway. The myth of toughness, that loud, rigid, I'm in charge persona, is just a performance. It's an act. The reality, which is backed up by decades of research, is that real strength is actually quiet, it's adaptive, and it's cooperative. It's not a costume you put on, it's an internal architecture of resilience that you actually have to build. Okay, so if we're gonna build this internal architecture, where do we even start? Well, lucky for us, psychology has given us a blueprint, and it's a concept that completely changed our understanding of what it means to be resilient. It's called psychological hardiness. This idea was pioneered by a researcher named Suzanne C. Cabaza. She was fascinated by this question. Why do some people seem to thrive under incredible stress while other people just crumble? And the answer she found had nothing to do with being loud or aggressive. It was all about a specific set of attitudes you hold inside. This internal architecture, this resilience, it stands on three core pillars. They're known as the 3 Cs. First up is commitment. That's a deep sense of purpose and curiosity about what you're doing. Second is control, the belief that you can actually influence what happens around you. And the third is challenge, seeing change and disruptions not as threats, but as genuine opportunities to grow. And what's so cool is how these components literally act like a shield against stress. Commitment stops you from feeling isolated and alone. Control fights off that awful feeling of powerlessness. Challenge makes you less sensitive to threats. And, oh yeah, later research added a fourth, absolutely crucial C, connection. Knowing you have people in your corner, that's a vital part of this internal strength. All right, so we've got a pretty good picture of what real strength looks like. Now let's flip the coin. What about that harsh, loud behavior we started with? Well, it turns out that psychology sees that as a massive sign of profound weakness. The key concept here is something called compensatory narcissism. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. This isn't about genuine confidence, not at all. It's a defense mechanism. A person projects this big image of superiority specifically to cover up deep, deep feelings of insecurity. It's like the louder the performance, the more fragile the person is underneath. And this gives us a really simple way to tell the difference, something you could call the fragility test. A genuinely strong, hardy person, they can take feedback, they can absorb disagreement. But a brittle person who's just performing toughness, their entire identity relies on nobody challenging them. So the second you do, they either explode or they just collapse. And look, this isn't just a nice theory. The data is absolutely overwhelming. A massive analysis, we're talking data from over 123,000 people, found a direct link. Narcissism is associated with a 21% increase in aggression and an 18% increase in actual violence. And the trigger? Usually something that pierces that fragile ego, like being ignored or insulted. So this performance of toughness doesn't just reveal a fragile ego, it inflicts real, measurable damage on the people around it. And I don't just mean psychologically. Harsh, abrasive language physically rewires the brain. To get how this works, there's a really useful model called transactional analysis. It basically says we communicate from one of 3 ego states. There's a critical or nurturing parent state, a logical adult state, and an emotional child state. So the best, most productive conversations happen adult to adult. But when someone comes at you from a critical parent state, scolding, authoritative, harsh, it almost always triggers a child response in the other person. You might get them to do what you want for a minute, but what you've really done is kill initiative, trust, and any feeling of safety. So what's the antidote to lashing out like a critical parent? Well, it's a skill called emotional granularity. All it means is the ability to get really specific about what you're feeling. Instead of just, I'm angry, can you figure out if you're actually disappointed, or maybe overwhelmed, or disrespected? That precision gives your brain more options than just attack. But okay, let's get to the most shocking part, the physical damage. Just look at this number. Studies show that a history of verbal abuse is linked to an average 12% reduction in the volume of the left hippocampus. That's a part of the brain that's absolutely critical for memory and regulating stress. We're talking about physical brain damage. And it doesn't stop there. Verbal abuse can shrink the area of the corpus callosum, which makes it harder to integrate logic with emotion. It creates limbic irritability, which leads to more aggression and impulsivity. Let's be really clear about this. Harshness isn't tough. It's a neurotoxin. So if being loud and harsh is a fragile, damaging strategy, then what actually works? What does real toughness look like in the most high-pressure jobs on the entire planet? Just look at this. Trauma surgeons, they don't succeed by yelling. They use something called closed-loop communication to make sure every message is received and understood with quiet precision. Crisis negotiators, they don't threaten. They use active listening and empathy. Elite athletes don't get angry. They use cognitive reappraisal to turn nerves into excitement. All of these are skills of quiet, controlled strength. And this all boils down to one of the most important ideas in performance today: psychological safety. The very best teams are not the ones that never make mistakes. They're the ones where every single person feels safe enough to admit a mistake without being afraid of getting shamed or punished. And that kind of environment can only be created by real strength, not by that fragile, tough guy act. So what's the big takeaway here? Real toughness isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's that internal architecture built on commitment, control, challenge, and connection. It's the quiet confidence that allows you to listen, to adapt, and to create safety for other people. It really all comes down to this. The truly tough individuals have nothing to prove, nothing to shout, and nothing to threaten.